Are you a businesswoman who's finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. If you want to see how your presentation skills are doing, please go to our free 4-minute assessment at www.speakforresultsquiz.com. Elizabeth uses her 30 years of experience as an opera director to help business professionals become better presenters. This special series explores the relationship between business and art. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts on issues of communication, leadership, visibility, etc. And I am so delighted to have my wonderful friend, Lawrence Brownlee, international opera tenor. So he sings at the great international companies around the world. He has also commissioned song cycles. He's also a very talented musician on other instruments, photographer, and Larry, I'm just going to have to put a link to your bio in the show notes because there's so many things that you do. In addition to the Facebook Live series that you're doing, how do you describe yourself when you're talking to non-opera people?
How do I describe myself? Well, I try to be a humble guy, and I just say I'm just a normal guy who happens to sing opera. I love all my hobbies. In addition to, as you said, playing instruments, I am in love with salsa dancing. I also play tennis and table tennis. And so, as it said, as the saying goes, the jack of all trades, but the master of none. No, whatever I like, I really, really, really like. And so I just consider myself a normal guy with a lot of passion that I always try to get myself into.
Well, you have a photography company too, right?
I do. I guess you can call it a photography company. And many of my colleagues in, the opera business use my photos as their professional headshots. So I appreciate that. But it's just a passion and a hobby of mine. I don't think I've charged any of those people that are using those headshots. And so a company usually makes money, but I don't make money there. But it's just another outlet for me. Myself being an opera singer, I like to be have my skill that I do, but have other things that I'm always a student at. And so that's the basis of it.
So for our non-opera listeners, you're a tenor who sings really high and really fast. Can you talk a little bit about how you describe your niche?
Well, when I was studying music many years ago in university, I went to a small school called Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana, and then I went to do my master's at Indiana University. When I was trying to figure out what type of singer I was, my teachers knew that I had a high voice, and one teacher in particular, he introduced me to the music of Rossini, Gioacchino Rossini from Italy. Mm-hmm. And so there's a style called bel canto, which means beautiful singing. But this music is about singing high lines, high melodic lines with fast moving notes. If you think about gospel, if anyone knows what gospel is, you have a lot of melismatic moving notes. Stevie Wonder, even some of these current singers, they sing a lot of fast notes. Well, that's where my basis came from, singing gospel in church. So I had the flexibility in my voice to move it around. And so when he introduced me to Rossini, he said, this is probably what I was born to sing. So I sing that music that comes from the late 1600s into the 1700s. Other composers are Bellini and Donizetti. And so that's the bulk of the repertoire that I sing. But as you said, I'm fortunate to be able to sing it in places like Italy and France and Germany and Spain and New York, all over the world. So that's what I am, a bel canto tenor.
Okay. So the reason why I wanted to put together this special series is to talk to some of my fellow arts professionals. You and I met at the Houston Grand Opera when I had heard about you, but you were singing in La Cenerentola in one rehearsal room, and I was working across the hall directing Faust, and we both we wound up having a lot of lunches and dinners together. So it was being a tenor is important. You know, they always talk about tenors and you know how few people can actually sing this range, but it's also only about 5% of people who study it actually wind up making a career. So do you have any thoughts about what you did in terms of maybe mentorship and allies that got you to the point of being visible, being heard, and being accepted?
Well, I have to say, early in my career, I had teachers that told me that you really have to focus in on what you are. You can't be kind of a generalized cookie cutter, anything. You need to find one thing that you feel that you excel at and really go after that thing. And so since I zeroed in on this bel canto repertoire, this is a category or a genre of the classical world that is pretty rare, as most people talk. It's difficult, as some people say, to move your voice around and to have this flexibility. So if you have this natural innate ability to sing this already gives you an advantage. But also, since having a higher voice that moves and being able to work in different languages, this opened up many possibilities. And so I had some people from Italy and really learned people who I got a chance to work with in my studies that directed me in the right way, told me the repertoire that I should focus on. And then in university, graduate school, when I was singing operas, most of the things I got a chance to perform on the stage were specifically in this category. So I was really focusing in on bel canto, and the mentors that I had along the way steered me correctly. And then when I started going into different arenas, being on bigger stages or, you know, more focused areas where people were looking for talent, thankfully, I felt like the skills I had been working on had been polished enough that people wanted to take a chance on me. And so it gave me the opportunity to be successful at a higher level. Competitions like the Metropolitan Opera competition, which is one of the most important vocal competitions in the world for those of you who are not opera lovers. And so it's highly visible, and all the agents and directors and everyone comes to see who's the next big thing. And so I was fortunate to be one of the winners of this in 2001, and that was essentially the real beginning of my career.
So let's talk about race.
Yes.
Because you're African American, as anybody who's watching this can see, or anybody who saw the picture, saw the promo pictures. What is it like? What challenges have you had to deal with as an African American performer, especially as a man who's supposed to be the romantic lead?
Mm-hmm. Well, tenors are almost always the romantic leads. And so as an African-American man, I'm not very tall either. I'm about 5'6" or so. I say 5'6", maybe 5'5.5", but needing to play the romantic lead in a European art form, you know, the origins from Europe. And so a lot of times when the roles were written, they weren't written with a person that looks like me in mind. But thankfully, in the beginning of my career, I had people all along who encouraged me and told me that I had to believe in my talent and believe that I was actually born and meant to sing this. But I've had some difficulties along the way. I've had people even tell me, now that I've been fortunate to be successful, that they blocked me. They blocked me, and they intentionally made it hard for me because they didn't believe that I would have a career in this. And so being a child in a family, one of 6 kids, our father and mother, they really gave us a great belief in who we were. And so I had a lot of confidence, but that confidence was always built on hard work. So I worked hard, and my dad told me a long time ago, worry about the things you can control, and the other stuff, let it go. And so I really focused on, you know, my acting and my languages, my musicality, my preparation, being always on time, being a good colleague, and then trying to deliver the music with something special. And so that has been the thing, regardless of the fact that someone would look at me and say, well, you're a Black man, and you don't necessarily fit the mold. along the way, working on my acting, trying to be a credible, believable person on stage. So that has served me well. And thankfully, it's been something that has allowed me to go to all the great stages of the world.
I've never forgotten years ago, I think it may have been that time when we first met in Houston, that you had worked with my wonderful friend Eduardo Muller, the wonderful Italian conductor, and that he had said to you, you cannot change the color of your skin, you cannot change your height, and both of those don't fit the normal categories. So you just have to be so good that they cannot use that as an excuse to turn you down.
Absolutely. He was one of many people that said you have to give them no reason. There should be no reason for them not to hire you, because if someone says you're short and black, but you are coming in and you have a voice that is absolutely for this, and you are the best auditioner of the day, and you move people to tears, and you inspire people, and you sing these pieces as if the composer wrote it for you, there's no reason. So I worried about those things that I could control. And Eduardo Muller, God rest his soul, was one of the people in the very, very beginning of my career who was excited about my talent. And he didn't have to. This is someone who had a really big career, but he believed in what it was that I had in me. And so he wanted to promote that. And that's the thing that I appreciate about many people that have helped me in my career. It was more about me and helping me get this talent that I was blessed with out. And so Eduardo Muller, Spade Jenkins, Stephen Lord, these are people that all supported me very, very early in my career.
Well, again, three of my favorite people. So that's great. Now, international conversation is a big theme of this podcast, and how you are perceived. Let me take a step back. One of the reasons why I call my company, call this podcast Speakers Who Get Results, is because if you are communicating in order to get a result, such as singing an audition, you have to take into account who's listening and what their expectations are. I'm curious, as an international star, well, you're a big star now, but before you became a big star, what is the difference as an African-American singing in the US and singing in other countries, any of the other countries?
Well, I have to say, because it seems like opera came from Europe, people have a great appreciation of it. Of course, in other countries, there's racism that exists everywhere. But there's something unique about the racism here in America. We could get into that, talking about, discrimination, police, brutality, so many other things. And so all the, there's hierarchical differences or class differences in racism in the UK or in Italy and France and all these other places. But it's not as much as it seems to be so pervasive here in the United States. That being said, when I go to Europe and people, especially in the beginning of my career, before people knew who I was, I had, the mentality, I had my head down and I was forging ahead. I wasn't really paying attention to racism necessarily because it seemed less present than it was in the States, in some of these other places. And so I just was focused on trying to really do my job well. In the beginning of my career, I had an agent who said, your job is to be hired again. Be hired again. Yeah. And so I went there to the companies, making sure that I gave the best representation of myself, tried to be a good colleague, tried to do what I was hired to do. And that's what I went on. So racism does exist, but it's a lot more prevalent, or it seems a lot more visible here in the States than some of the other countries. And I've been to, at this point, 47 countries in my life. And there have been times where people look at me differently. I remember being in Kazakhstan and someone stopped me in the middle of the airport and wanted to take a picture with me because I don't think they had ever seen another Black person in real life. And so I don't call that racism. I just think people are fascinated by the fact they see a person, especially from the United States, who's Black. So that's been interesting. But, I don't really try to focus so much on that. So
the lesson then might be to be as good as you can be.
Mm-hmm.
And also, so be as good as you can be. How does this fit into how you brand yourself, how you position yourself? Not necessarily racism, but just in all of this. What could someone who's not one of the few singers who can actually manage this repertoire, so you're one of the best, how could an ordinary person take a lesson from your experience in terms of showing up?
My motto is really being the best version of myself. Even when I see someone who's similar someone who does the same thing that I do, for me, it's never competition. And I don't get jealous of someone else's success because I think I'm always trying to perfect who I am as an artist. I can be the best version of myself, but the worst version of someone else. And so as long as I think about worrying about myself, strengthening the things that I do well, focusing on doing those things is, highlighting my strengths and, not showing my weaknesses so much. That's what I think about. So yeah, that's what I always do. The best version of myself, try to look at how I can maximize what it is I have. And then if you're competing with yourself, you're never disappointed. But the minute you begin to try to compare what you've done to someone else, or to try to get on someone else's level, or to look at their success and covet it, I think that's where you start to go wrong. Because if you can continue to reinvent yourself and to try to keep going with the times, I think you'll be the happiest. So
that's actually a great way to think of it. What do you say to, so I know you see young people come to you all the time, people at the beginning of their careers. Now that you and I've been doing it for a while, I started a little bit before you did, but people come to you for advice. How do you deal with those who are afraid to stand out and make too much of a disturb things too much? Fear of pushback, I think, is what I'm really trying to say.
Well, I guess, when people even talk about asking questions, the worst question is the one that wasn't asked. If you don't try, I think you'll never know what you could have done or what you could become. And so for me, thankfully, early on in my studies and my family, I was always encouraged by my parents to just try. I'm one of these guys that I think it just takes a little bit of effort to do anything, even as far as like speaking languages. And I speak, it's not perfect, but I speak parts of 4 languages. But that was something that I felt like Rome wasn't built in a day, and it didn't have to be overnight. But it's been like the collective time of my whole career that I've built on these things. And so every time I go back to this country, I should be a little bit better. So when you think about the pushback and the fact that someone may reject you or someone may think you're not built for this, I think that's, again, not worrying about yourself, but worrying about others. And so I've tried to spend as little time worrying about other people. People will be there to try to discourage you and push you off your path and push back and everything else. But I think I am the most content inside myself, knowing that I gave the effort, that because it is in me. And I go with the confidence of the things that I've worked on, the things that I've studied, the things that I've built, the things I've invested my time in, day by day, not, in 5 minutes, but over the course of my career. So I'm not worried about the pushback because I can sleep at night knowing that I gave my best effort.
I should actually ask you at this point then, a lesson you've learned from a time when you did a bad performance, because we've all had them. We've all had the
yes.
ones where we just really blew it.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I remember not being well one time and giving a performance, because in our business, especially as opera singers, we get paid on a per performance basis. And so if you don't do a performance, you don't get paid. And especially if this is your livelihood, I have a family, I have a wife and 2 kids. You think about, okay, I still want to do my job and I want to get paid because this is the way we support ourselves. I remember having a performance that was not good for me. And I remember talking to my daughter. She was maybe 2 years old then. She's 8 years old. So about 6 years ago. And I said something to her. I was like, Daddy was not good tonight. She said, that's okay. You're still my daddy. And so it kind of brought everything into perspective that the world still goes on. Yes, it is an art form. And for me, I always say it is not about being perfect in a performance. And even though I thought it was bad, there were a lot of people who told me that they could see that I was struggling, but they appreciated my effort. And there were some moments that were actually special because I put extra care in trying to be, a better actor or communicator. My voice was not functioning. I was dealing with something. And so what I learned is that it's really not that bad. And, when I think about some things or moments in life that seem really, really difficult, I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, I think it was 7 years ago, that I lost one of my dear friends to suicide. And I remember someone saying about that you should never make a permanent decision off of a temporary problem. So when I'm on stage and it doesn't go well, it's a temporary situation. And if I'm doing the things to get better and to try to get healthier or to have a better next show, this is a temporary thing that my whole life shouldn't be based on. And so I just let it roll off my back. And I have this attitude that the next time I'll do as well as I can.
That's wonderful. One of the things that now at this stage in your career, you have some celebrity. And so you are using it. I mean, that's one of the things. If you have a name, I think you have a responsibility to use it, to talk about things that are. Tell us about the Sit Down with LB series that you are doing right now. And anybody who's listening will have links to this in the show notes. And it's a fascinating series of conversations.
Well, the Sit Down with LB began out of COVID. We're all at home, but it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And as you said, I get a chance to travel the world singing in many theaters in, the great theaters of the world. And so people begin to know who you are. And I've been reached out to by people, young tenors in general, but specifically young African-American tenors or young African-American singers in general. And they have the question for me, how did you make it? How did you become successful? What was it? What kept you going when I know that there have been doors slammed in your face? I know that people told you that it was not possible. What was it that drove you to continue doing it? And so when people ask me this all the time, when I was sitting at home in the middle of March and realizing that all my work essentially for the rest of the year might be canceled, that I wanted to be productive in some way. So I thought it would be a good time to kind of like talk to some of my colleagues. I have a group of friends of mine. We talk about being mentors, and it's really important that we do that. So I started this Sit Down with LB to invite some of my colleagues that I really respect and admire to come and give their own accounts, coupled with the things that I talk about, and just to give them some advice so they can navigate their budding careers, how they're going to proceed in the future. So we talk about everything from their life and their careers to discrimination, and even some things that people who are not Black would never even think about. For example,
I should just point out that all of these guests are African-American opera singers with successful careers.
Yes, that's correct. There are people who've been fortunate to sing in different areas too. So I actually had George Shirley, who's one of my idols, who's 86 years old and who lived through an era when it was probably even more difficult to be successful. But he was the first African-American tenor to ever sing on the Metropolitan Opera stage, which is considered by many the most important opera stage now in the world. But just come and talk about our lives in discrimination. We talk about costuming and wigs and perception and international travel, how you're perceived, so many different things. And so there's been a lot of positive feedback thus far, thankfully, and I'm having a lot of fun doing the Sit Down with LB.
Yeah, and in terms of costuming and wigs, this actually goes to how do you adapt to your situation. And this, I'll tell you, this works for speakers as well, is, how can you deal with the lighting if the lighting is designed to reflect lighter skin and you've got darker skin? So how can you show up in a way when you can't always control what it is? How can you still make sure that people see you?
Well, you have to be better. You have to be better and learn from situations that are not the most favorable. So I actually learned how to do my own makeup many years ago. And one of the great divas, Martina Arroyo, when I was at Indiana University, she sat me down and taught me how to do my makeup. I didn't know that I would need it so early in my career. So I would then travel around with my own foundation. And that really is the basis of it, especially under lights that weren't made for skin that looks like mine. And Black people have many different shades of Black. And so I'm a darker Black person, not the darkest, but a darker Black person. And there is a certain amount of red that you have to have underneath your foundation, or else you come out looking like a ghost. And so I've learned that those things in the past. And then, even I've been able to tell a makeup artist here and there who didn't have the experience of doing makeup for a person that looks like me. And they were thankful because they wanted to improve as well and wanted to do their best job. And so, yeah, you just adapt and make sure you take care of yourself, because if I'm there to be the leading tenor, I want to make sure I look the part as much as possible.
I remember seeing Lena Horne in her solo show, The Lady and Her Music, back in the early 80s.
Yes.
And she told the story of being the singer for the movie of Showboat. And she sang the role of Julie, and Ava Gardner acted it. And they were friends. And Max Factor had to come up with a different color makeup for Lena Horne, who was a movie star legitimately a movie star at that point, but he called it Light Egyptian. And it was done to lighten her face. And then it was used again in Showboat to darken Ava Gardner's face, so that Ava Gardner, who's playing a half black, half white character of Julie, so that Ava Gardner looked more like Lena Horne. And Ava Gardner said, Lena, why don't they just have you do the part? But in Hollywood of those days, they couldn't do it.
You understand why? Yes.
Yes. How do you talk about that? I want to pursue this just a little bit more. We're recording this in June of 2020, and America has gone through 2.5 weeks of riots and demonstrations against racism, which is suddenly making things very, making your sit down with LB very pertinent. Do you have any hopes and dreams for how this can go forward? I mean, you're talking about opera, but in the context of what's happening in America now.
Well, as you said before, I've tried to use my platform as an opportunity to talk to people. I have many friends from many different races, and I consider them friends. And so, in these last couple of weeks, based upon the recent killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a lot of people have reached out to me, a lot of my Caucasian friends, my white friends, who wanted to know how they could be better. And so what I've done is actually restarted a book club that I used to lead, another one of my hobbies. And so we're going to discuss racism. And I'm challenging people to be introspective, to look inside themselves, to begin to tear down these things, because, I'm hoping that we'll make tremendous strides in the future with, just discrimination, racism, equality. And so it's important for me right now. And I am a musician, but because I get a chance to be visible and I guess important to a lot of musicians, it gives me a platform to be able to talk about something that I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about equal rights. I'm passionate about the fact that police brutality should not be excessive to anyone, especially people of color. And so this book club that's supposed to happen, we're supposed to have a discussion coming up pretty soon. Already 300 people have signed up for it. So many people are wanting this. They want to know. They're reading the book. They're excited about the potential. Many people have written and said, I know that I don't need to say anything. I just need to listen. and I am ready because of what's been happening. I'm ready to listening. So that really warms my heart, and I'm excited about the potential of that.
That's wonderful. Well, Larry Brownlee is a man of many talents and multidimensional talents. That was one of the reasons why I really wanted to interview you. I just had one thought for those of you who are still stuck in thinking of the opera box. Being able to use one's position at one's status in a company is the functional equivalent of if you are at C-level or a senior director in a corporation and you have something to say that sets you up as a thought leader, that is the same sort of status. And so, Larry, you are establishing yourself as a thought leader. Yeah, I don't know. It might be might be a phrase that it's a really exciting phrase. Is you're establishing yourself as a thought leader. If you haven't considered applying that to yourself, tuck it in the back of your mind, because that's one of these days you're going to have to move on to something else, opera being right. What it is. So it's like sports, after a while, somebody else comes along. So right. We don't know what's happening now.
Well, we don't know what the next chapter is. And so all the things that I feel like I've been gifted or equipped to do, I like the fact, or I believe in the idea that, when the next chapter comes, I'll be ready to assume a different role if that's that's what's in the cards. And so I'm excited about that challenge and that possibility.
And the most important part is your daughter can look at you and say, "You're still my daddy." So, Larry Brownlee, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. And this has been Speakers Who Get Results. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends, share this, leave us a good review on iTunes, leave us a good review on YouTube. We're on all the social media channels. And this has been Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.